Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It is a lovely summer day here in suburban Chicago, and I am coming to you on my walk home from the library where I picked up Terminator 2 Judgment Day. We showed my daughter Terminator 1, and I don't think that she knows enough about Terminator 2 to know the essential plot difference between Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. And if you haven't seen that movie in a while, they cut Terminator 2 so that it's a surprise. And I'm really excited to see what happens with her. I don't remember if she knows the difference or not, but I'm excited to see. So today I thought that I would do a little bit of a flashback. I had a game sitting on my shelf that I had gotten out to maybe play, because we play it a couple times a year. And I realized that I don't think I've ever heard another podcast talk about it. So I started thinking about what are some games in my collection. And these are all games that I've mentioned before, I'm sure. So this might be a boring episode. You may want to just roll on to the next episode. Maybe not. Maybe don't go anywhere, but maybe. And what I would like to do is talk a bit about these games that I think are really good, that I wish people would know about a little more. Some of these games, I'll call them out when I think they're difficult, if not impossible, to get a hold of. In fact, I would suggest all of these games you probably need to acquire in the used game market. I don't think any of them, with the exception of the first one I mentioned, is still in print and actively being sold by game shops. That said, these games are all really good, and I encourage you to try them if you get a chance. If you see them in your game group library and you get to try them out, give them a try, because they're really interesting and worth a look. I'll also offer as another caveat, 3 of these games are games that I got through Kickstarter or Kickstarter adjacency, and that's part of why I have them and they're not as common. Okay, so now you know the background. So here it is, my list of 5 games from my collection that I wish would get more love in the hobby. Number 1, the most recent game, the one that started off this list, Chocolate Factory. Chocolate Factory is I think a 2019 game, maybe 2018 game from Brett Gilbert and Matt Dunstan, or Matt Gilbert and Brett Dunstan. No, Brett Gilbert and Matt Dunstan. The design team behind Elysium and a bunch of other games. I like their style. They, as I mentioned a couple episodes ago, they always get a look from me when a game comes out from them. This is one of those ones that I thought sounded cool, and sure enough, it is pretty cool. I really like it. Chocolate Factory is an engine builder in which you are running the eponymous chocolate factory, or one of several, in order to make sweets for local shops in your city. The idea is you have this conveyor belt, and you have these chocolate machines that convert different kinds of chocolate ingredients into different kinds of chocolate or candies, and then you sell them to local shops and to big shops. So those are kind of the two ideas. So the way the game works is you have this, like I said, it's a conveyor belt of these tiles, and each round you get to move the conveyor belt 3 times. Each round you get to move the conveyor belt 3 times. You're going to play 7 days worth of rounds, 1 week, and you'll deliver chocolates each day. So it's a very tight game, very short. And each game, each round, what you get to put 1 cocoa bean on each tile as you push it onto your conveyor belt, and you get a certain amount of coal each day for the whole game. So you start the game with 5 coal, and then you go up to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 coal in the last round. The coal you use to run your machines, and you can run each machine once each shift. So your factory runs 3 shifts. That's why you get 3 conveyor belt tiles, and you can move your conveyor belt 3 times. And what you're trying to do is set up an engine whereby you convert the cocoa bean into unprocessed cocoa, and then into bars or nuggets, and then into sweet wrapped candies, and then box candies. The idea is that you, as you're doing this converting, you then have to, at various times, move the conveyor. You can either move the candies off the conveyor belt when they reach the end, and the conveyor belt is 4 spaces long, so you can't actually get if you start a cocoa bean on one day, it doesn't reach the end of the conveyor belt until the end of the next day. Or there is a spot in the middle where you can drop them off. So the first cocoa bean that you move in will reach the drop-off spot on the last shift of the first day. So each round you're also buying new machines and new employees, which help change the efficiency at which you manipulate the machine. There's a drafting element too, where you're buying these employees, and the employees give you different bonus powers, but they also give you the ability to sell to one of the 5 big candy chains. And selling to the candy chains is really important because you get big bonuses if you sell the most to a particular candy chain, but you also get a bonus for how many different candy chains you sell to. So over the course of 7 days, you want to make sure you sell to as many of the candy chains as you can at least once in order to get that 4 or 5 chain bonus, because that ends up being a lot of points. It's a really fun, very thematic game with cute little pieces. It's pretty samey, so every time you play it, it's basically the same game. But I don't have a problem with that, and I have enough games that if I want to play Chocolate Factory, I recognize it's going to be Chocolate Factory. It's not going to be wildly different each time, but I really like it. I wish more people would play it. That's Chocolate Factory. The next game is one of the first games I backed on Kickstarter because of the art, and that is Strife, Legacy of the Eternals, I think it's called. In Strife, is a 2-player dueling card game where you have 9 cards at the beginning, and each round you pick and play 1 card. And the idea is the card you play does something when you play it, but it also triggers the power of the last card you played. And the combination of the card you played and the last card you played makes up your turn. And each card has a speed, and so the speed that you and your opponent are playing your cards at determines when your card gets to go. So sometimes your card will get moved around or manipulated in ways. And the goal is to build up sort of control over these locations, which give you points at the end of the game. It's a very thinky, really interesting duel game where you're basically just really facing off against an opponent in a very strong way. And it has an exceptional element of bluffing or mind reading because each player has the exact same set of cards, and as you play them, you can see which cards other people have played, so you know which cards they have left. So as the game goes along, it becomes a matter of trying to figure out which of the 3 cards they have left are they going to play, and how does that interact with the cards they have there, and so on. They made a sequel to it called Strife, Shadows, and Steam. It's very similar, but with 9 different powers, or 9 different cards that have different sets of powers on them. You're allowed to mix and match them. So you could have the number 4 card from one set and the number 6 card from another set and so on. But you have to use numbers 1 through 9. It's an excellent game, well worth playing if you can find it. But as far as I know, I don't know that it ever reached distribution. And I don't know how much people were able to get a hold of it. But that's Strife, Legacy of the Eternals, or Strife, Shadows, and Steam. The next game I want to mention also has the word legacy in the title, and this is Legacy Gears of Time. This was the first game from now well-known publisher Floodgate Games. Ben Harkins is the designer and publisher. This game has at its core a time travel theme. You are competing factions from the future, trying to control the past by going into the past and inventing technologies before the people who historically invent them. And basically the idea of the game is the further back in the past you go, the older the technologies you can invent, and the new technologies depend on the older technologies having been invented. So there's a really interesting element where at the beginning you want to go back and invent ironsmithing so that then you can invent steel and you can invent cars or whatever. And if you control all those things, then you get a lot of points for cars. But if someone else then takes control of iron, then you lose some of the points you get for steel. Or even worse, if somebody manages to disrupt the invention of something entirely, then all the cards that depend on it are lost. It's a really interesting game, very thinky, very weird, really strange art, delightfully strange, but just an excellent, weird game, one that almost nobody has played, and I wish that more people had played. So I'm excited to have it and to have people play it. Again, that's Legacy, Gears of Time. All right, 2 left. One of these falls into the category of, oh, Martin Wallace, you nut. So as you know, I'm a big Martin Wallace fan. He produced a number of games during the half decade or so that he was running Tree Frog games. And these games sort of notoriously weird and a little undercooked probably, but really interesting. One of these was based on a comic book called something, Dr. Warblatt's something. It was sort of a golden age era adventure sci-fi tale in the spirit of Howard, the guy who wrote Conan, but probably not full of the same amount of sexism and racism. But the idea is that, sort of Victorian English adventurers build steampunk spaceships and go into space. And in Onward to Venus, you play one of the Earth factions trying to colonize the solar system using these steampunk machines. So you're building rockets and dropping tanks and mining equipment on different planets in order to gain control of them. It's got a really weird table presence that makes for an interesting game. Instead of a board, you have 9 planets, which you spread out in a line. And then as you play, you move from planet to planet and try to take or keep control of them. Different planets have different resources available. There are some solar system-wide events, like if a certain string of things happens, then sentient robots take over the moon, and that becomes a concern. It's just a delightfully weird game that I've played twice and I thought was really neat, and I haven't played it again since, and I really would like to. So if you get a chance, my guess is if you find it, it'll be in a bargain bin somewhere for just a couple bucks. Well worth a look if you get a chance. That's Martin Wallace's Onward to Venus. And the last game I want to talk about today is perhaps the most criminally undermentioned. It's also probably the hardest to find. This is a game from the now defunct publishing company Fun to 11 Games. They made several games, 3 of which I have. The last 2 that they made I did not get, but they made a game called Epic PvP, in which you play. It's a shuffle builder where you play a warrior made from a race and a class, and you fight another warrior made from a race and a class. It had a really interesting mechanism by which you have your energy and the moves that you have, the cards you have in your hand, which allow you to do things. To get more cards, you have to take them out of your energy. And your energy pool, you get a certain number of cards into it each round. And so if you're constantly taking cards out of your energy pool in order to do things, it keeps your energy low enough that you can't really play the big cards. It's a really interesting mechanism that works nicely. That said, that's not the game I'm talking about today. The game I want to talk about is a lovely little dice building game called Castle Dice. Now, Castle Dice is a game where you are one of 4 children of a king, and the king wants you to take over the land, but he wants only the best castle builder to take over the land. So the king suggests that whoever builds the best castle will take over the land. And the way the game works, you have these cards, and you have to pay certain symbols in order to get the cards. And the symbols come from the dice that are rolled. And here's the fun part. Each round, you get to put in a certain number of dice, but the dice go into a big pool, and everybody drafts from that pool in turn order. So some of the things that really happen, they're really interesting the way they happen. So like 3 people might put in dice with the yellow dice, which are likely to give you gold. But one of them might not roll gold. It might end up with a house or something. And so then when the drafting comes, only 2 people are going to want to take the gold-bearing dice, and the third person who put a gold die in is going to be kind of salty about that. So then they'll take something else that's really good, and everybody gets sort of frustrated. So there's an interesting interaction in the dice drafting that is really great, because you'll put a die in because you want it, and then someone else takes it, and it's both frustrating and delightful at the same time. The art in this game is absolutely adorable. It's very clean, cartoony art that fits the imagery really well. It looks it's not chibi art, but it's in that kind of range, but very cartoonish, and it's a lovely experience to play it. The dice are nice and chunky, and the overall gameplay experience is just great. So that's the last game I'll mention today that I wish more people knew about and got a chance to play, and that's Castle Dice from Fun to 11 Games. I believe the designer is Luke Peterschmidt. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for joining me on my walk today. What game in your collection do you wish more people would talk about and play? Do you wish I would talk about and play it? Let me know. You can do that over on Board Game Geek and Guild 3269. That's the best place. You could also send me a geek mail message. Wombat929 is my username. Or you can email me, Brendan@Rattlebox or reach out to me. Wombat929 is my username in a variety of other asynchronous gaming platforms like Board Game Arena, Wataju, and Yukata.de. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.